Good morning, everyone. I would like maybe first to thank you, Paolo, Emiliano, Roberto, for organizing this summer school. Once again, it's the third edition. I think it's quite important that we try to have this special moment where we meet each other and we try to train each other and to learn from each other about European education and about sociology of education. So thank you very much for doing it. I know it's a lot of work, and thank you for your patience, because I at least have been late quite often in sending my stuff. Okay, so I've prepared, I've prepared two things. I've prepared a lecture, but I've also prepared a task that you will be given, that will be asked to do later on this morning. Maybe I should say a word about the task right now, because they are related to the lecture, of course. I've prepared basically two tasks, and you will receive them, I think, by email, and you will also have copies of them in the groups, okay? In the first task, I will just give you a sample of European education policy, a few pages of European education policy. It's just an extract from a 2016 document called the Entrepreneurship Competence Framework. Just a few pages, not very long. And what I will ask you is, what I suggest that you do is to read these pages and deal with a few questions, which you can read there, which you will have on the slides. One question is, how is time constructed or reconstructed in the rationale of this document? How is time constructed? Another question is, how is education framed and delimited? And compare this framing of education in this short document with our traditional understanding of what education is, right? And see the differences. I will also ask you to, when you read the document, to look for signs of expansion or contraction of education, okay? And in the lecture, I will explain what I mean by expansion of education. And then lastly, also maybe reflect on basis of the document about how has this piece of European education policy been elaborated. Because the document explains how it's been elaborated. So what's the rationale about the construction of this education policy, of this European education policy? And maybe using the notions of governing, governance, maybe the idea of knowledge also, in order to understand how they have constructed this piece of education policy. Okay, so that's the first task. And of course, during the lecture, if I manage to do it well, you will get elements, ideas about the notion of time, the notion of expansion of education, etc. Okay? It's 9 pages, but you will see that the first pages is the title, the second pages there is just a small abstract, the third pages, but it's important, and the third pages is about acknowledgement. Okay, we thank this and this. It's very important to read it also for this question. Huh? Who has been involved in it? And then the next page is the executive summary, and the next one is just the first page of the document. But this is enough to give you a good idea of how things are framed and how education is reconstructed in this document. Okay? Yeah. And then the second task. Okay, the second task is just, I will ask you just to make sense I will ask you to make sense of two graphics, and I will now explain what they are. These are representation of the historic evolution of the occurrence of specific words in publications through time. Okay? It's something you do with Google. So from the year, I think it's 1800 until today, the occurrence, the presence in world publications of the term learning, okay? And of the term teaching, okay? So in the first graphic, you cannot read them, but remember that the first one is learning, because I think even on the document itself, you won't be able to read it. But the first one is learning. Here, it goes like this. And the second one is teaching, okay? So it will be just about, well, reflect on this and how can we make sense of these evolutions in society self-descriptions, actually. And then the second graph is, I think this is from the year 1950. So it's a, this is sociology of education. Okay, going up, that's the 70s. 70s. And then going down. Yeah. If you look for sociology, instead of sociology of education, you see the same thing. If you look for sociology of religion, you see the same trend. Okay? If you look for social class, you see the same trend. Okay? So this is sociology of education. And this, can you guess? Huh? Yeah, learning science. Okay? Learning sciences. And so you can also see here, I think it's from the 80s that it goes up a lot. Okay, so these are the two tasks. The document with a few questions and the two graphs, reflect on them and possibly using some of the points that I will try to make in the lecture now. Okay? All right. And you will get the documents. Okay. So, the lecture. My lecture, I think of it as an invitation. It's an invitation to try to think with Niklas Luhmann system theory. I don't know if any of you is familiar with Niklas Luhmann system theory. Is someone familiar with it? Yeah? A bit? Good. Okay. All right. In my initial idea, I was going to talk about Luhmann and Bourdieu, but I think it was too complicated, so I will focus on Luhmann. It's complicated enough. Right? It's really, really tough. I know. But I mean, if there is a place to try to talk about this, it's here. Right? So there are two main reasons for this invitation. And I think they are the same reasons as the reasons why at some point we started Network 28 in ERA, so the Network Sociologies of Education. And there are the same reasons why we are actually doing this summer school. The first reason is that at some point I think several of us felt that there was a problem with sociology of education. And basically the problem was, well, what's happening to sociology in sociology of education. At least that's how I remember the process of establishing Network 28 and this summer school. It's about, we had lost a sense of the discipline. We were worried about the discipline of sociology in education research. So what's happening to sociology? I was personally, I think, very sensitive to this because, but this may be different for you, but personally I feel like sociology for me is home and education is a field of interest, right? But there are other possible fields of interest. And therefore putting sociology back at the center was and is something that is, I think, very important. I think we also felt that some sociologists of education had become more interested in education than in sociology. And maybe they have been trapped into this by external expectations, by policymakers or by the field of practice. And they became involved in trying to solve problems, find solutions, produce useful knowledge, change the world in a way, make things better. And I think this is a problem. I think that as sociologists, well, I know you're not all sociologists, but I will speak for my discipline. I think that as sociologists, we are not primarily there to make things change, right? We are there to understand, and maybe understand why they don't change, why it's so difficult to change, why those who try to change fail most of the time. Reform fail, social movements fail. So this was one big issue about bringing back the discipline in education research. But then there was another issue. It was Europe, Europeanization, globalization. It was clear that Europe and other international, transnational, global instances were increasingly involved in education policy, increasingly active in the governance of education. But the problem was, do we have a theory? Do we have conceptual means to understand this? Do we have a theory of globalization? Do we have a theory of globalization of education? Do we have a theory of Europeanization of education? So this was another big concern, to understand the globalization and Europeanization of education. So for these two reasons, we felt that sociology of education needed to gain some distance again from politics, from policy, from practice, maybe from itself in a certain way, to gain some distance again. And in order to gain some distance again, one possible strategy is to try to start over again from social theory, or if you want, from sociological theory, right? It's one possible strategy. So the idea there is to have sociology, fundamental sociology, help sociology of education, right? To go back to fundamental theories. This is the reason why I got interested in Luhmann, because it is a very fundamental sociological theory and not well known. I think this is also the reasons why others got interested in Latour, Foucault, Bourdieu, and trying to use these fundamental sociological theories to help sociology of education. There are some quotes from Shane and Osga, but I think they refer also to this concern about sociology in sociology of education, and the concern to link our work with broader social configuration. That's the same kinds of ideas.